Okay, I want to start with a poem that I wrote many years ago on Tisha B'Av, and this is what came out. This is called the 9th of Av. It's the experience at night. This was like last night. Night falls harshly, yet silently. Darkness, a prelude to death. We sit solemn, heads bowed downward, candles lit on the floor, in memory and mourning for an age long gone, an idea not yet born. Death and destruction raise their ugly heads as visions of the Holocaust eat away at the heart. The temple in ruins throws its shadow ominously across the room. A public ceremony of remembrance for those who are no longer, martyrs and the innocent, the brave and the unsuspecting. A fire burns heavenward to the one, the only one. Darkness, a veil of paradox, covers the moon. The meaning of all of this lost in the maze, waiting to be found unexpectedly in a moment of pain. The holiness of the sacrifice to sanctify your name. Stones scattered and abandoned have not forgotten. My bones, weary and sore, crack beneath the burden, determined not to let all the suffering be in vain. The reason I wanted to share that was really for one word at the end, and that was determined. That I know for many years, the whole 3 weeks, the 9 days, I would go into a pretty deep depression when I would think of all the brokenness of the world, think of all of Jewish history, all the catastrophes. My natural reaction was to be depressed. And as I learned more Chassidut, and I matured, hopefully, spiritually, I came to understand that being depressed is not the right attitude for the 3 weeks or the 9 days or Tisha B'Av. To acknowledge the brokenness, to feel the brokenness, absolutely. But not so much that it clouds our determination, as I said at the end of the poem, that all of this should not be in vain. In other words, that's in our hands now. What has happened, and we're told that there's 2 levels of the mourning on Tisha B'Av. One is mourning over what was, what we don't have anymore, the weight of all of Jewish history. And the other is the anticipation and the longing for a redeemed world. And especially now, because I'm speaking in Israel, and the afternoon of Tisha B'Av is a different energy than the night of Tisha B'Av. The night of Tisha B'Av, we do sit on the ground, and we should let that heaviness enter into us. The Arizal says about Rosh Hashanah, he says that if someone doesn't cry, at least for a moment on Rosh Hashanah, they haven't really experienced Rosh Hashanah. Now, the tear could be a real tear, or it could be a tear that we really are crying inside. And so the same thing really applies to Tisha B'Av. I'll never forget this. When I was in yeshiva, and it was really my first Tisha B'Av. I didn't, as a youth, I didn't even hear about Tisha B'Av. I didn't even know about it. But here I was a so-called new Baal Tshuva, and I was doing my first Tisha B'Av, and I was very sad, depressed. And I was in yeshiva at Har Zion, which is right outside the kever of David HaMelech. And that's where the whole yeshiva sat while we said keynote. Keynote are the special poems or dirges that we say during Tisha B'Av. And we're sitting there for hours saying these incredibly graphic, sad, awesomely depressing keynote, and but they're all true. All these things happen to us. And we're sitting there, and for people to get in and out of the grave of David, they had to pass through us. So at a certain point, a elderly Sephardi woman comes and walks across. She goes into Kever David, and within 2 or 3 minutes, she's wailing, like really wailing about Tisha B'Av. And I'll never forget that Rosh Yeshiva turned to all of us and himself, and he said, "Do you see what just happened here? We've been sitting here for hours, and not one person has cried a tear. This woman comes in, and within 2 minutes, she is crying from the depths of her heart." I'll never forget that. I'll never forget that. So this Tisha B'Av, I'll just share with you. I was with a whole group of people, and we shared deep stories and everything, but no one was crying. Today, I was reading one of many, many, many stories in a book called Small Miracles of the Holocaust. And one of the stories just touched me so deeply, my mama started crying. And I remembered that story. And I was like, Baruch Hashem, I really can open my heart. And not just like intellectually, I could really, really open my heart. So it's really, really good, even on the inside, to cry a tear on Tisha B'Av. But like I said, the main word here is determined. That here we are, again, I'm speaking for myself, back in Eretz Yisrael. We have 1 foot in the redemption. We all do. We have 1 foot in redemption. But sometimes, if you remember Paul Simon's song, the nearer you are to your destination, the more you're slip sliding away. So the closer we are to Geula, sometimes it hurts even more that we're not there yet. We're so close, but we're not there yet. Now, can you imagine someone sitting, 500 years ago in a basement in Spain, because if anyone knew that they were observing Tisha B'Av, they would be burned at the stake. Or can you imagine even 75 years, someone in Auschwitz on Tisha B'Av? So there it's easier to understand how broken someone could be on Tisha B'Av. But here we're back in Eretz Yisrael. Yerushalayim has been rebuilt. There are Jews from all over the world. Israel's become the Silicon Valley of the world, the startup nation. Unfortunately, as we speak, we're in another war. We're even in another war. But at least this time we have an army to defend us. So we're so close to the redemption. Who knows what one more tear might do. You know, one of Reb Shlomo's first albums was I Heard the Wall Crying. I heard the wall crying. There's actually a story of, I don't remember the name now, but he used to go to the Kotel every single day, including Tisha B'Av. Every day of the year, he would go to the Kotel. And when he would get to the Kotel, he would greet the Kotel. And he would like enjoy. He would, I don't know the exact words, but he would greet the Kotel, and he would like kind of tune in to what the Kotel was telling him. But he said, the only time I don't greet the Kotel is on Tisha B'Av, because I have no idea what I would actually say. And I have no idea what the Kotel would say back to me. So that's the one time of the year I don't greet the Kotel. Now, for those who have been following the fundamentals, so we have been doing a series about Shvirat HaKelim, the breaking of the vessels, the explanation of the Arizal for how the world was created in the initial stages of a previous world. The lights were so awesome, were so strong, pure, that the vessels of creation could not hold them, and the vessels shattered. And the shattered vessels and the light that was found in these vessels, that is what creates the reality of this world. And we learned that the word for breaking, shever, is the same word for to provide or to sustain. That's why Yosef was called the mashbir, from the word shever. And grain sometimes is called shever. So here you have a tremendous paradox that the same word for breaking is the same word of providing, of sustaining. And so we learned in great depth the idea that so many times that in the breaking itself is the seed or the spark of the healing or the redemption or the fixing that will come afterwards. And that is very much in Tisha B'Av, because we have this amazing teaching from the Talmud that Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. And that's why the afternoon of Tisha B'Av is a different energy, because as much as we sat last night and mourned, and we sat until midday today, some of you are still before midday, and the custom is to sit on the floor or a low chair. But at noon, we get up. We get up and we cling to the incredible determination that the Jewish people have had for quite literally millenniums now, that there will be a redeemed world. There will be a rectified world. And that right now, there's virtually no time in history that we're not closer to a true redemption. We already have a global village in the physical sense. Just the fact that we're sitting here together and there's thousands of miles separating all of us, and instantaneously we're all connected. This is Mashiach energy. But we don't have the spiritual global village yet. That is what we're longing for. That is really what Tisha B'Av is about. But the remembering and the awareness of exile and the awareness of darkness and the awareness of what an unrectified world is like is crucial to pave the way for a redeemed world. In Hallel, we say, Even ma'asu habonim haita l'rosh pina. The stones that the builders discarded, rejected, they will be the foundation stone. They will be the foundation stone. David HaMelech, for the first part of his life, he was an outcast. He was like not even counted among his family. And then after he killed Goliath, and he married Shaul's daughter, but Shaul lost the kingship. And David is made king in secret. And Shaul chases him and tries to kill him. And his whole life, he is the stone that was rejected by the builders, but he laid the foundation for the temple to be built. Okay, so I want to tell a story. This is one of my favorite stories. I heard it from Reb Shlomo a couple of times. And the story is that halakhically, during the 9 days, we don't eat meat or drink wine. The only exception is if someone makes a siyum, someone finishes a substantial amount of learning, and they conclude the learning, then you can eat meat and drink wine. Now, most people did not practice such a thing, but there was a group of Hasidim that practiced this to the hilt. And these were the students of the Yaroslaver. That was his name. That was the name of the town. He was called the Yaroslaver Rebbe. And every day, one of the students would make a siyum, and they would sing and they would dance, they would eat meat and drink wine during the 9 days. For many people, this was scandalous. This was scandalous. So there was a great Hasidic Rebbe, the Sanzer Rebbe. Many of you have heard of him, the Sanzer Rebbe. And he heard about the Yaroslaver, and he wanted to see for himself, like, what's going on there? Like, are they for real? He had many, many sons. Each one became a Rebbe. And one of them later was called the Shinover Rebbe. But he was only like 15 years old now, and he was very frum, very, very straight, like an arrow. And his father wanted to go to Yaroslav for Tisha B'Av. And his son was like, how can you think of doing that? Do you know what they do? Like, no way, you can't go to Yaroslav for Tisha B'Av. But his father said, no, I need to go. I need to see what's happening there. And the Shinover, now, like, this is the son talking to the father, said, I'm not letting you go alone. If you go, I'm going to go to protect you. So the Shinover goes with him, and the whole time he's like, why am I doing this? Like, I can't believe we're doing this. They get to Yaroslav, And it's the afternoon before Tisha B'Av. And of course, someone made a siyum, and they're feasting. And the shinover is like, he cannot believe this. He's pulling on his father. Please, can we go home? Please, can we get out of here? This is not our place. And the Sanzer said, no, I have to see what happens here. And so it's getting close to sunset. You have to stop eating at sunset. And it's getting closer to sunset, and eating and drinking and singing and dancing. And he's like almost tearing out his hair. Right at sunset, at least they stop eating and drinking, but they continue to sing. And it goes on and on and on. And this poor young boy is just beside himself. He can't believe that he allowed his father to come. He can't believe that he came. And he's just like feeling like at the end. Around 11 at night, the dancing and singing end. And all of a sudden it becomes totally quiet. Totally quiet. And the Yaroslaver Rebbe gets up and he opens the book of Lamentations, and he's standing there for a long time, and you could hear a pin drop. And he gets ready to read the first word. The first word is Echa. How could this happen? And the whole book of Lamentations continues explaining how could the beauty of Jerusalem, the holiness of Jerusalem, the holiness of the people, how could it have fallen to such a disastrous state? And the Yaroslaver screamed out. It was almost beyond a human scream. He screamed, Eicha, in such a way that it just sent like waves of terror through everyone in the room. And the Yaroslaver fainted and he fell on the ground. Now we know this story from the Shinover Rebbe himself. He writes the story about himself. And he says, at that moment, I ran over to the Yaroslaver and I stood over him, and my tears were falling on his face, because only then did I understand that had he and his students not strengthened themselves with hope and a vision of a better future, that they wouldn't have survived. And it took the longest time for them to revive the Yaroslaver. And the Shinover said, I stood over him the whole time and like kind of begging for forgiveness that I had judged him the way I did. I remember hearing the story from Reb Shlomo, and I almost didn't get through it this time without crying. But like Reb Shlomo used to say, what do we know? What do we know? So now I'm going to tell you a story that I only heard last night that also touched me to my, not just to me, to my very being. So for many, many years, Reb Shlomo was here for Tisha B'Av, and we always would sit outside of the shul on the ground and read Eicha. And then he would tell stories and we'd sing songs. And it just got into the depths of our hearts. So last night, after we read Eilicha, I was moved to tell some stories about Shema Yisrael. Many, many stories of, some are hopeful, some are heartbreaking. But the idea was like kind of see from the time that Rabbi Akiva died a martyr's death with the Shema on his lips, and how quite literally millions went to the gas chambers, and their last words were Shema. And even a person who knows they're about to die recites the Shema. So there are many, many, many different stories about the Shema. And I told some of them. And then one of the women on the Moshav, Zahava Gilmore, whose son, Eish Kodesh, Alav Shalom, he was killed in a terrorist attack. He's the only person on the Moshav who actually died in any of the wars or any of the terrorist attacks. And it happened in the year 2000. And at the time, it was so traumatic for the whole community, especially for the young people, because he was very young, and they all looked up to him. He was like one of the first, if not the first, to go into the army. He was in a very, very elite unit, and so all the young people looked up to him. And so she told a story last night. Every year at Yom HaZikaron, she speaks, Israel Memorial Day. And she always has such deep insight into just about everything. But of course, around her losing her son and all that entails. And so last night, after I told these different stories about the Shema, so she revealed something she had not revealed before. I'm not sure if she even understood that she had never revealed it before, because a couple of people came up to her and said, "Wow, we've never heard this before from you." And so she said that the day before her son was killed, I don't remember exactly, but she had learned something about the Shema. And the morning that he was killed, she was in her house, and she decided to meditate on the Shema. And she had this very, very deep meditation on the Shema. Only later did she come to realize that exactly when she was saying the Shema, that's when her son's soul left this world. And it was like, it was just so, there's really no words to express how we felt when we heard that. And yet, Zahav is really a paradigm of someone who is, despite it all, very optimistic, very upbeat, and with deep faith and deep determination. That's how we started this whole learning. The idea of Tisha B'Av, of feeling the brokenness in a deep way, deep way. But that feeling should make us determined to do our own personal part in thought, speech, and action to bring a better world, to be part of the redemptive process that is happening in Israel among the Jewish people, and hopefully it is spreading to the whole world. I remember after what happened in Mumbai at the Chabad house, people remember, I don't remember exactly how many years ago, I think it's about 10 years now, where there was this massive terrorist attack in Mumbai at 4 or 5 places, and one of them that was targeted on purpose was the Chabad house. And the director and his wife and 4 or 5 other people were killed. And very, very famous story of how the nanny or the nurse of one of their children, who I believe was like 3 years old at the time, she was able to like whisk him away, and she was able to protect him until the terrorist attack was over. And it's a very, very well-known story in Israel. And so I heard this from someone who was there. I'm not sure where it was, but there was what was called the Shloshim. 30 days after this event, there was a gathering in memory of the people who had died in the Chabad house, and especially the director and his wife. And one of the people got up and said, "We're going to take revenge. We're going to take revenge." And people were pretty shocked. No one knew what he was going to say next. And he said, "We're going to take revenge. We're going to spread so much light in the world that we're going to wipe out evil." And this is just such a classic statement or idea. Now, we know in Jewish law that if someone gets up to kill you, you have every right to defend yourself and to kill first. So that is a given. But of course we have to defend ourselves. It's what happens in Israel every single day since the formation of the state, and even before it. We're in a constant state of trying to defend ourselves. But ultimately, we have to spread light in the world. We have to spread the light of the Torah, the light of God, the light of the Jewish people, the light of the land of Israel. And we have to share it with the whole world. That is what is going to ultimately change the world. There's a famous statement by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. I'll put it quickly in perspective. Is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I think everyone knows he's the transmitter of the teachings of the Zohar. And he spent 12 years in a cave because he had a death sentence on his head from the Romans. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, so he saw the temple destroyed. He saw the failure of the Bar Chachma rebellion. He saw his teacher, Rabbi Akiva, being tortured to death. He spent, after that, 12 years in a cave, hiding from the Romans who wanted to kill him. And then if you go back from the moment we came into the land of Israel, which was approximately 1,400 years before Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, there was just one war after another. one enemy after another came to try to take Eretz Yisrael away. The temples were destroyed. We went into exile in Babylon. We went to exile into Rome. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, after 1,400 years, is sitting with 9 other students in what's called the Idra Rabbah, the Great Gathering. And in it, he's talking about judgment. And then he says to them, but for us, now everything depends on love. And then he goes on with his teaching. So I understand this is, it wasn't just a simple statement. Now remember, this is 1,800 years before the Beatles said, all you need is love. This is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai sitting with 9 of his students, giving over the secrets of the Torah. But his statement came in the context of, as I said, after 1,400 years of battle after battle, war after war, destruction after destruction, it's like the war is over. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was telling them, we're going to survive. We're going to make it. And it all depends on love. Our love of Torah, our love of God, our love of each other, and our love of the land of Israel, the 4 great loves. And this was the survival mode of the Jewish people throughout history. We were pretty defenseless. We didn't have the arms, we didn't have the armies, we didn't have the organization. So through the long exile, we were at the whim of every nation that we were under. Of course, all of that changed about 75, 80 years ago with the recreation of the state of Israel. And of course, a tremendous turning point was the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. The Warsaw Ghetto Uprising is a landmark in Jewish history, is where it's not like we lost that love, but at that point, if you're in Warsaw, and at one point there were like 500,000 people in Warsaw. Now you're down to the last couple thousand. All the rest basically were either killed, died of disease, or were taken to the concentration camps. And they decided to rebel, and they knew that they would all die. Actually, a few people actually made it out, but everyone understood that they weren't going to make it out. But they had to, in a sense, change the context of Jewish history. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was ultimately right, and especially now when we're starting to make peace with our Arab neighbors. On one hand, we're still fighting, literally today, as we speak. And on the other hand, something new is happening. Something very new is happening. We're making peace with our Arab neighbors. And God willing, we will all see this increase and multiply. And this kind of a new vision for where the world is going to go. This is the ultimate vision of Tisha B'Av. Now, for those of you who know, yesterday was the 9th of Av. Today is the 10th of Av. But as you may know, we don't fast on Shabbat. And so the fast was pushed off till today. But usually the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av is what's called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of vision. And it's taken from the opening word of the book of Isaiah, Chazon Yeshayahu, the vision of Isaiah. But it just turns out that the Shabbos of Chazon fell out on Tisha B'Av yesterday. But in a very famous teaching, Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev said that in this day, we all could be granted a vision of the third temple. And so Rav Ginsburg explained that what we've been talking about today, that the ultimate meaning of Tisha B'Av is holding on to the vision. Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. Out of the exile will come redemption. Out of the darkness will come light. Out of the breaking will come the healing. And so Rav Ginsburg explains that beyond this vision of the third temple, which will be called Beit Tefillah L'Kol Ha'amim, it will be called a house of prayer for all people. This is God's words, that the third temple will be a house of prayer. It will be a house of God's prayer, and it will gather all the people of the world together. But Rav Ginsburg was also saying that on a deeper level, when the first instructions for the tabernacle were given, God said, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a holy place, and I will dwell in them. And so the very famous teaching is, it doesn't say in it, about a building. It says in them, in each and every person. And so, yes, we long for a third temple. And yes, it will be the gathering of all the peoples in the world in Yerushalayim, Ir HaKodesh. But even on a deeper level is the vision how each and every one of us can become a dwelling place, a temple for God, for God's presence. That is the ultimate chazon, vision that God wants, because that's what God said, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham, within them. Now that can be understood within them because the tabernacle was within them. The temple will be with them. It's not a contradiction in terms of a physical temple, and also all of us making a place for God within us. So let's sing a little bit. We'll tell some more stories. So there are many, many, many songs that come from the book of Eilicha. You'll have to forgive me. My throat is getting very dry here, but I'll make it. So I want to sing you Reb Shlomo's Shifchi Kamayim Libech Nochak Pnei Hashem. And then I want to sing you mine and tell a story behind it. Many of you know this song. Let me find, for those who have the Book of Lamentations, I want to find it so you could look it up if you want. It's in the second chapter, the 19th verse, the second part of the 19th verse. The first part, the Breslov Hasidim have a famous song, but this is the second part, and it's Shivchi Kamayim Libech. Pour out your heart like water, Nochach Pnei Hashem, directly in front of Hashem, in the presence of God. Pour out your heart like water. שפכי כמים כמים ליבך נוכח פני השם שפכי כמים כמים ליבך נוכח פני Hashem. You'll forgive me because of my voice. It's not exactly the right chords here. I'll try again. Shivki kamayim kamayim libech nochach penei Hashem. Shivki kamayim kamayim libech nochach penei Hashem. Oy shivchi kamayim libech nochach penei Hashem. Shivchi kamayim kamayim libech nochach penei Hashem. Ininai nai nai ai oh. Ininai nai nai oh. Ininai nai 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 oh. Ay, 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 ay. I'm sorry about the chords. Okay, now for those who have been either on the 70 Faces or the fundamentals, so I sang a Shivchi Chamayim that came down to me on Tisha B'Av. I'm going to sing it again fairly quickly because some of you have heard it already. And then I'm going to tell you an awesome story behind this song. And I don't tell this story that often. And I'm saying this from the bottom of my heart. I have to feel like really in a safe, loving, warm environment. And since all of us have been learning together for a long time now, I feel in that safe, loving, beautiful place. So I'm going to sing the song. It's the same words. Shivchi kamayim libech nochach pnei Hashem. Pour out your heart like water in front of God. But then there's the second part, which is the last verse. Anyone who has the book of Lamentations, just go to the very last verse. In the 5th parak, verse 21. And that's how we end it. Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem. After this heart-rendering book of Lamentations, it ends in a positive way. God, return us to you, and we'll return us like the days of old and in the glory days. Shivchi kamayim libech nochach pnei Hashem. Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'nashuva chadesh yameinu kekedem Hashivenu השיבנו השם, אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. שבחי כמים ליבך, נוכח פני השם, השיבנו השם, אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. השיבנו השם, אליך ונשובה, חדש ימינו כקדם. Okay, listen to this story. So this song came down to me on Tisha B'Av in the morning, and I was like the last one out of shul, and I was there by myself when this niggun came down, and I felt it was something extraordinary, something special. So I went home and I recorded it on my MP3, just the way I sang it right now. And that was it. A few days go by, and a friend from Denver, who I'd known for a long time, wrote me an email and said that she had been experiencing a lot of very serious medical issues, really life and death kind of issues. And she shared it with me. And she said, "Do you have a song for me that will comfort my soul?" And the first thing I thought of was this niggun that had just come down to me. And so I wrote her back immediately, and I attached this niggun to the email. And I said, it's to me, it's so strange that you asked for a niggun, because this niggun just came down to me. And because of the last words, Hashivenu Hashem Elecha v'Nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem, God, return us to you, and we will return and renew our days of old. I felt tremendous comfort on Tisha B'Av from this niggun. So I sent the niggun to her, and she wrote back and said, "Thank you so much. This really brought me comfort." Okay. I thought that was the end of the story. It must have been a year later. I'm in Denver, and I'm doing an event, and lots of people came, including this woman. And I sang this niggun. But I didn't tell the rest of the story. I didn't feel I had permission. And she said, after I sang this niggun, so she said, "I have to tell you, there's another part of the story that you don't know." And this is what she said. She said, on Tisha B'Av night, I was sitting on the floor, and I had all these serious medical issues that were terribly affecting me, and I felt my life's like ebbing away. And in this situation, so I turned to Hashem and I asked for strength. And God gave me strength and said, don't worry, Rabbi Trugman will have a song for you that will comfort your soul. When I heard this, I had no words. I still have no words. And it reminds you of the story I just told you about Zahava Gilmore, that she didn't know on any kind of a physical level that when she was saying Shema, she was connecting it to her son. And here, when this nigun came down, I didn't know why it was coming down. But obviously, there was something else happening that made this nigun come down. So I want to bless all of us. I want to bless us all that we're told that when Mashiach comes, prophecy will return to the Jewish people. And since we are getting very close to Mashiach, that's why the story I just told, the story that Zahava Gilmore told, that these things can occur. So I just want to give us a blessing. And I'll just mention, because I know many of you come to the Tuesday class, and if you don't, I'm inviting you to come this Tuesday, because we're going to learn a teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that was developed by Rabbi Ginsburg, when the Lubavitcher Rebbe said that he had done everything he could to bring Mashiach, and now it was in our hands. And he said, one of the things I can tell you, that the way to bring Mashiach is to take orot de tohu, b'kelim de tikkun, to be able to take the lights of tohu, of this previous world, this awesome, infinite, eternal light, and make the vessels to hold it. And we're going to learn about this on Tuesday night. Everyone is invited. But that's the stage of history we're in now, stage of historical development, is we have 1 foot in Geula. Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. And I just want to bless us all that we could become proper vessels for this awesome kind of light. It's a prophetic kind of light. It's not something we can control or we can direct. We can just try to make ourselves fitting vessels. I want to tell another story really quickly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart. For those people who come often, so we know that our group is made up of, I would say, a majority of Jews, but we have a nice representation of non-Jews who join us for our learning. So I really, in a sense, want to dedicate this to all of the non-Jews who have been learning with us and have shown such connection to the Jewish people and Torah. by telling this story. This story is, if anyone wants to read it, it's in a book called Small Miracles of the Holocaust. And it is an absolute true story. And it's a story of Irina Sendler. And the story is like this. I have to tell it quickly because we don't have a lot more time. But it's really an awesome story. Irina Sendler was a young Polish woman in Warsaw in 1939. And she worked for the Polish government as part of like social services agency. 1939, Nazis take over Germany, and part of the process is they forced up to 500,000 Jews into the Warsaw Ghetto. Their final solution had not been completely worked out yet. And here you had, in a relatively small area, 500,000 people. And within months, people started dying of starvation, of disease. A horrible situation. Every few weeks, they were taking people away to the death camps. Anyways, Irina Sendler, as part of the Polish government, part of her work was to go into the Warsaw Ghetto. It still was Polish territory. She was raised Catholic. She had such compassion at what was going, like, just other than the Nazis, who wouldn't have compassion? And so she joined an underground group whose purpose was to link up with Jews who were escaping to the forests to create a resistance. There was a Polish resistance and there was also a Jewish resistance. Many times they worked together. And her job, as crazy as it sounds, was to convince Jewish parents to let her take their children, to smuggle them out of the ghetto, and to find temporary homes for them, and and she would keep track of where everyone was. And after this whole horrendous thing, she would get the parents back with the children. Now, you can imagine what a hard sell that is. She's an absolute stranger, and she's going to talk people to give up their children to a stranger and maybe never see them again. But as more and more people were dying, were being taken off, rumors were coming back that when you're taken from here, you don't come back. So to make a long story short, in around a year's time, she was able to smuggle out 2,500 children. What they they would drug them, and she came in and out with a truck every day, and she would hide them in suitcases, in tool chests, in bags, under coats. She smuggled out 2,500 children, and what she did is she made sure to get everyone's name, the parents' name, the children's name, the date. She got the names of which families that risked their life to host a young child. And she put them in bottles and she hid them under a tree in a neighbor's yard. The SS finally got track of what she was doing, arrested her, tried to get her to divulge other names of people working with her, which she refused. They broke both of her legs and they were going to kill her. The resistance, she was so valued in the resistance, they came up with an enormous bribe, and they bribed one of the guards who was going to claim that he shot her and buried her, and she would go free. And that's what happened. They paid this guard. He was instructed to kill her, and he faked it and made a burial place. And a year or two later, the Germans found out, and they tracked her to the end of the war, but they didn't catch her. She had broken legs for the rest of her life. After the war, she went back under the tree. She had them all. She had everyone. The only thing is hardly anyone came back. Of the 2,500 children, she was able to connect really only a small handful with the real parents. She felt heartbroken by this. She was later recognized, and she is one of what's called the righteous Gentiles from Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, the Holocaust memorial. And then she was forgotten for history. She was forgotten. I think she was awarded in 1968. We go ahead to the early 90s. And so it's in Kansas. And there's a junior high, maybe it was a high school, I think it was a junior high class project about, the theme was someone who changes a person's life. And somehow they got information about this woman, Arieh Sendler, and how she had saved 2,500 children. So at first they thought, no, it can't be right. It was probably either 250 children or 25. It must be a misprint. They did research, and it turns out she really saved 2,500 children. I have to say, I didn't mention before, the most of the real parents never came back, but Arieh Sendler made sure that these children were sent to Jewish institutions, orphanages, or to Israel. She made sure they did not stay with the families that they were given to. She made sure that they all, or to relatives, because she had information about relatives also. I didn't say that. So these girls did research, and they created a play about her, and they called it Life in a Jar. And they put on this play in Kansas. And so someone just shared a link. Everyone should look at it. And so they put on the play in different places. And they put on a play about 100 miles from their hometown in Kansas. And there was a man there who saw this. And at the end of the play, they mentioned that it was the girl's dream to meet Arieh Sendler. She was still alive. She was in her 90s. And this man was a businessman. And within a couple of hours, he raised enough money to send these 4 girls, their families, and the teacher to Arieh Sendler in Warsaw. And it happened. And they met, and Arieh was just, like I said, she had been forgotten to history. But the Polish papers picked up on this, and it became a sensation throughout Poland. She was actually nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize after this whole story came out. And again, in short, these 4 girls, they went back 4 different times to visit her. And finally, Arieh Sendler passed away, I think at age either 94 or 98. So this is just such an incredible story. And I really wanted to share it because of the sharing that we have been doing all this time between Jews and non-Jews. And I thought it would be very, very appropriate. There's so much more to say, so much more to give over, but I do have to daven mincha, and there's a special section for a fast day, and there's a special bracha about rebuilding Jerusalem, so I don't want to miss it. But I want to end with a nigun. And many of you know this nigun, but maybe don't know the whole story of this nigun. It's called the Krakow nigun. And the story, very, very quickly, is in 1989, Reb Shlomo was invited by the Polish government to do a tour of performances in Poland. And he went with a lot of his chevra, and huge concerts. It was on television. It was a big, big thing. One of the days when they were in Krakow, so they went to, I'm trying to think of which one of the death camps. I'm sorry, my mind, it was either Treblinka. Someone help me here. Okay, the name of the camp it was right near Warsaw, and it was the first time that Reb Shlomo had been at any of the camps, and he personally lost many, many relatives. The Karlbach family is a huge family, and many, many people died in the Holocaust. And after the visit, they came back to the Ramah Shul. The Ramah Shul in Krakow is a very, very famous shul. The Ramah was Rabbi Moshe Isserles, who wrote the Ashkenaz comments on the Shulchan Aruch in the 1600s. And in the shul, he's teaching, and this nigun comes down to him. And the first part of the nigun is a very, very slow nigun. It's like a funeral dirge. And in Reb Shlomo's mind, he was seeing the 6 million marching, like bodies with no souls. And it was like a funeral dirge. And then in the song, these disensouled bodies said to him, "Can you tell us the way to Yerushalayim? Because we're going to Yerushalayim." And then the second part of the nigun comes down, and it's a very, very happy nigun. And so this nigun, in a sense, encapsulates all of Jewish history, all of human history, is that from the beginning, we've just seen a almost non-ending series of wars and hatred and disagreements and dictators and massacres and genocide. And now obviously there's a good part of the world, but there is a very broken part of the world that we do acknowledge on Tisha B'Av. But then there's the part of the world that is a beautiful world. We've said this many, many, many times, that the Zohar says that this part of my heart is crying, and this part of my heart is joyful. And that's because it is a broken world, but it's also a beautiful world. And so the second part of the nigun is on Tisha B'Av. Mashiach is born. So how can we not be joyous? So I think many people know this nigun. Wherever you are, you can sing with me. And our kavanah should be that this song is Tisha B'Av. This is the breaking and the healing, the exile and the redemption, the darkness and the light. And I want to bless all of us that we should hold on to the light. We started today with the word determination. We should be determined to do our little part. Our little part is not so little. I'm sure Irina Sendler thought she was doing just a little thing here, but it turned into this huge thing. She saved 2,500 lives. So our little things, we have no idea who it's affecting, how it's affecting. And so we should live to see the light. We should live to see the full redemption. We have 1 foot there. 1 foot there. Yes, Avraham is saying it's 1 minute to Shkia. So I'm going to sing the song and wave goodbye and go daven mincha. Thank you for all coming. Once again, it should be Aliyah Shema for Yekutziel ben Leib, the father of Bracha. And I just want to say, I see that there's all these chats. They will be posted tomorrow, and b'li neder, I will try to go through them and see if I can comment on any of them. Everyone have the rest of an easy fast.